Putin's entire Ukraine invasion hinges on the coming battle of Kherson. Preparations for a major Ukrainian counteroffensive in the south of the country have been underway since May. Ukraine prepares an ambitious counterattack. Ukrainian offensive forces Russia to bolster troops in occupied south. At this point, it's a little bit sus that we're all reading this in the news, but we good. They sent everything to the Kherson front. It was reported that the Ukrainian armed forces are accumulating forces for the offensive in several sections of the front, and once again tried to gain a foothold at the Lozove-Adrivka line. Ukrainian infantry units have been beefed up with anti-tank weapons as well as manpads. And on July 27th, Ukraine forces struck the Antonovsky Bridge at Kherson for the third time, rendering it unusable. Let's go, HIMARS! I'm hyped up. Let's go! We're not done. And to get enough punch, the Ukrainian army transferred a lot of troops from Donbass toward Kherson. And no need to worry because British spy chief says Russia is about to run out of steam in Ukraine, opening the door for Ukrainian forces to strike back. The Russians are bogged down in Donbass anyway, this time for real. I'm pretty excited. Let's take a look at the progress of this Ukraine offensive at Kherson. I gotta take the computer a bit closer. Maybe La Lupa will help. Oh yeah, it's there. I see that dot. Yeah, big success. Kadorna would be so proud. What is it, the 11th? 12th Kherson offensive? Apparently Ukraine cancelled further attacks against Kherson. All this hype for nothing. Even worse, Russians managed to build multiple ferries across the Dnieper at Kherson. That means supplies, ammunition, and reinforcements can still come to help the Russians. And the problem is, these targets are not valuable enough to be targeted by the HIMARS. The HIMARS and their missiles are very precious. You can't just waste them on any target. And now the Russians are fine. Perhaps that was the plan all along. Step 1. Tell everyone about the Kherson offensive. Step 2. Attract as many Russian forces in that sector. And then step 3. Moscow could be preparing new offensive operations in southern Ukraine. Unless this was the ruse, the deception of the century, and that the real Ukraine counteroffensive is meant to unfold somewhere else, which I really doubt. What the hell was this all about? The Russians might even be attacking from that sector now. In all seriousness, the Ukraine offensive is most likely scheduled between August 7th and the 12th. As here you can see 24 tanks of the 17th Tank Brigade that move from Dnipro towards the Kherson front just for this attack. And the problem is, the Ukrainian General Staff will have to make a difficult decision. Either they keep transferring forces from Donbass toward Kherson in an attempt to regain that city, but this comes at the cost of a continued Russian advance in Donbass, or abandon the idea of this Kherson counteroffensive once and for all and plug the gaps, but which would also show the world that the Ukraine army won't be able to reconquer any lost territory. Honestly, it's very tough. Hi and welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Here we cut the BS and talk about what the media doesn't tell you. As always, information changes by the hour, so if you have any new info, just comment it below. If you're new to this channel, make sure to check out my Ukraine playlist so you don't miss anything I've said in the past. And as you know, some of my Ukraine videos are triggering some people. Some of the vids have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to subscribe to my Patreon or support me on PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to all the ones that have already helped and welcome to the headquarters. But before we start, let me introduce today's sponsor, HelloFresh. It's a meal kit service that brings fresh pre-measured ingredients right to your door. And you can schedule how many times a week you need it. A couple years ago when I first moved out of my parents' home, let's say my cooking skills were not on point. It was either scrambled eggs or boring chicken and rice every day. And when I wanted to try new things, I would go grocery shopping and come back with stuff I would never use, and which I would get stuck with for a month. HelloFresh helped me change things up with their 50 weekly options, including a rotating selection of items at HelloFresh Market. There's plenty of new things to choose from. On top of that, it's easy. You simply have to follow step-by-step recipes and pre-portion ingredients. If I was able to do it, you can do it too. So use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use promo code POGLOG16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes plus 3 surprise gifts. It's all fresh and delicious. Once you click the link in my description, it will live update to count up the purchases, so be sure to check out the description and sign up today. And a huge thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. A Russian general offensive? As Ukrainians launched their attack on Kherson, the Russians launched their own general offensive. The situation is strangely similar to what happened at the Battle of Kursk. The Germans got stuck attacking the salient, and it all went finito basta when the Soviets counterattacked. Of course, how is this Russian offensive possible? The experts said that they're out of ammo, out of soldiers, low morale, they're crying every day. Yet they're attacking not from one, but 2 directions. The first obvious one is the attack on Bakhmut. But magically, they launched another attack somewhere really unexpected. An attempt to break through at Avdiivka and New York. Of course they did that. And why do you think? As you know, it was critical for Ukraine to launch a counterattack and show at least some success to keep getting Western weapons. Since the Ukrainian forces lack artillery pieces, the Ukraine General Staff had a genius idea, which others call a careless gamble. In all seriousness, there was some logic to what they did. They knew that the positions at Avdiivka and Pesky had been able to repulse Russian attacks for the past 5 months. These places are super fortresses. Because of that, the idea was to transfer infantry battalions from Donbass towards Kherson and remove most of the artillery batteries in the sector of Avdiivka and Pesky and send them towards Kherson as well. I mean, that leads me to a lot of questions. Didn't Ukraine have like 700,000, 1 million men? Anyway, the gamble relied on 3 assumptions. Number 1, that Avdiivka, Pesky, and all the other sectors around the city of Donetsk could hold without artillery support. 2, hope that the HIMARS destroyed enough Russian ammunition depots. And assumption number 3, that the Russians would not caught onto that maneuver. However, the moment the Ukrainians withdrew their artillery, the Ukrainian infantry became an easy prey for the Russian army. And now the entire Ukrainian front in Donetsk is showing signs of cracking. Of course, when I'm mentioning villages like Pesky, it's not really a village, it's rubble. As you can see here, DPR artillery is shelling Ukrainian positions. You can see Ukrainian soldiers in the trenches. Only after intense artillery barrage, ground assaults are allowed to push into enemy trenches. And at the time of this recording, the commander of the 11th Regiment of the DPR claims that he holds 60% of the village of Pesky. Here you can see combat footage of 3 Russian soldiers in Pesky. One of them is firing an AK-74 equipped with what seems to be a GP-25 grenade launcher. And he doesn't seem to be running out since he has a full basket of grenades in reserve. He also positioned his spare magazines on the shelves. Another on the left is equipped with a PKM, a Soviet machine gun. Let's look at a map of the village. Russian forces stormed Pesky from both sides of the lake, with most Ukrainian forces allegedly having retreated towards the MO4 road, towards the nearby town of Pervomaiske. Here's a first-hand account of a Ukrainian soldier at Pesky. Do you really want the truth? This is an effing meat grinder, where the battalion simply holds back the onslaught with their bodies. The reserve goes to the position, closes the breakthrough, and after 5 minutes, only one of the 15 men remains intact. At the same time, some Ukrainians claim that the Russians actually made no progress at all, and that the 21st Motorized Battalion Sarmat is holding firm. I guess we'll know who lied in a couple days. Problem is, the Russians are also pushing further north, towards Opitne and Vodiane, which makes the defense of Pesky even more complicated. DPR troops claim to have broken through Ukrainian lines south of Avdiivka, as they apparently took hold of the Butovka mine. They also claim to occupy the Donetsk water treatment plant. Here, a squad of DPR militiamen approach Ukraine positions using a forested area as camouflage. They advance from what seems to be an outpost connected by a trench. They seem to be using a lot of Soviet equipment, but I'm not an expert, so if someone could tell me in the comment section, I would gladly appreciate it. And this officer here claims to have been slightly wounded during a firefight. The Russians also previously cut the H20 highway north of Avdiivka. But you can get a clear picture of the Russian plan, instead of a frontal assault of the Ukraine grouping at Avdiivka, which some consider the most fortified position on earth. They're attempting to dislodge the defenders with an encirclement maneuver. Further south at Marinka, it was reported that Russian jets keep flying over the village, launching airstrike after airstrike. Some go as far as to say that the Ukrainians also removed a lot of anti-air batteries from the sector towards Kherson. And according to this map, the Russians have concentrated a lot of their forces to storm the village of Marinka. Meanwhile, Patrick Lancaster claims that the Ukrainians have already abandoned the positions and have since withdrawn. The problem is that not only can this attack be coupled with the one at Pesky, but such an attack could put the Ukraine grouping at Vuhledar into a precarious salient, perhaps even an encirclement, if the Russians have enough reserves to attack at Velika Novosilka. And actually, this is what some Ukrainians are claiming. They mention the presence of a massive Russian grouping in the Zaporozhye region, and they fear that their mission could be the assault on the city of Zaporozhye. One Ukraine blogger on Telegram said the following: "Colleagues, the moment for a counterattack in the south of Ukraine was lost, and now the Eastern Front is already feeling the miscalculations of the command, which wanted to follow the instructions of the president's office and organize the operation for the Battle of Kherson. In reality, the armed forces of Ukraine do not have the strength to strike, and the defense in the Donbass began to crumble, which could cause the loss of a strategic fortified area. Zaluzhny today asked Zelensky to allow part of the artillery to be returned to the Eastern Front, but so far there has been no decision." Can we trust this source? I don't know, but it seems to match the facts. But what he said about the crumbling defenses in Donbass continues further north. The battle for Bakhmut. As you can see on this map, the Russians seem to be going for a full-on assault of Bakhmut. Or option 1 that I laid out in a previous video. The Battle of Donbass is difficult because it's one of the most urbanized areas of the country. It's like one town after another, which forms some sort of huge, unending metropolis. So yes, the Russian advance is slow. Yet, we have to describe compared to what metrics it's slow, but the media says it's so, it must be true. In the past few days, an important battle took place that went largely unnoticed. It's the fall of Pokrovske. Wagner, LNR forces and Chechens managed to storm the town. Like I mentioned in my previous video, they first got a grip on the southern outskirts and then made their way up. And this position is very strategic. So much that the Ukrainian forces at Bakhmut even tried to counterattack and reclaim the settlement. But the mercenaries of Wagner held their ground and the Ukrainians had to pull back to their starting positions. And now it's actually the men of Wagner that are probing the defenses east directly into the city of Bakhmut. But like that, Pokrovsk became a stepping stone for the Russian allied forces. From there they launched an attack north on Bakhmutske, which is the southern suburb of Soledar, so they attack from both the south and the southeast from Novokamienka. The Russians have decided to focus their attention at the moment on Soledar instead of Siversk, because if Soledar falls, Siversk falls as well, without a fight, and I mentioned this in previous videos. And I feel that the Russians could fight on this arch, one village at a time, and fight their way through towards Bakhmut without having to go in open ground, where they could be blasted away by Ukrainian artillery. Such a move could be complicated for the Ukrainians, because it would effectively cut off the supplies towards Siversk, but also cut off the E40 highway, which could bring supplies and reinforcements from the north. And of course it would allow to attack the northern part of Bakhmut. At the same time, further south, the Ukrainians had to retreat from the Voleryska power station and all its surroundings. The good thing is that they actually managed to pull their men out and avoid an encirclement. And during that withdrawal, the villages of Semyhiria and Novoluhansk then fell into Russian hands as well. Problem is, from these positions, the Russians could be going for a maneuver I mentioned a long time ago. Even worse, the Russians could even roll west over all the trenches in the sector and kind of free up Horlivka, from where they could push north and support the assault on Bakhmut. From this highway, this one, and this one. In other words, they could flank the heavily fortified positions south of Bakhmut and roll over the entire southern part. And they seem to be doing so in 3 axes, along the Versina-Zaitsevo road, the Kodema road, and the Travnevny axis. Just looking at a map, it seems to me that the Russians aim at taking a hold at the TO513 highway, from where they could attack Bakhmut from the south. And in the worst case scenario, they could even push their advance further towards the H20 highway, thus completely shutting off supplies towards Bakhmut. With all these positions, the Russians could then attack the city from the north, the center, and the south. But yet, in the media, we read that Russians have little chances to take Bakhmut, according to military experts, of course. What's going on in the north? Another thing that's strange is that, allegedly, the entire front line from Siversk to Donetsk is mostly manned by LNR and DPR militiamen, which have recently been provided with extra armored vehicles, either from old stocks or from captured Ukrainian equipment. They're supported by the mercenaries from Wagner as well as Akhmat's Chechen units. Where has the Russian army gone? And this is precisely the main fear, the main worry of the Ukraine General Staff. The idea that Russian units have been pulled out of the front is obviously concerning because that means that the Russian army now has mobile reserves that have been given some rest, that are well supplied, and that they can position to their liking. Now, thanks to satellite imagery, the Ukrainians managed to find one major grouping near Zaporozhye, but an even bigger one near Belgorod. One might think the Russians are going to attack Kharkiv, but I highly doubt it. And these army columns were reported moving south towards Izium. And on top of that, somehow the Russians are getting even more reinforcements. The recent urban battles caused a lot of losses in infantry, motorized infantry, and these losses need to be replaced. Surprisingly, a lot of them come in the shape of volunteer battalions. For example, the Republic of Mariel, north of Kazan, has sent 2 volunteer battalions for training and is forming a 3rd battalion for deployment to Ukraine. If that's true, we're talking about 1,500 men. Leningrad Oblast and the city of St. Petersburg have already sent theirs. Novosibirsk, Kurgan, Saratov, and Ulyanovsk Oblast are also forming new volunteer battalions. Now here's the situation for the Ukraine army. In extremis, they managed to quickly plug the gaps near Slavyansk and reinforce their positions. I've seen videos where you have trucks with literally concrete bunkers on them, and these drive to the front, and that's how you can create a fortified position very fast. You use machinery, you put these concrete bunkers into the ground, and that's it. So the Russian progression has all but stopped in that area. However, with all these mobile reserves and all this extra manpower, according to the very latest news, the Russians managed to cross over the Seversky Donets River, establish a bridgehead, and are now advancing along the Bayrak-Uzarivka road. The successful Russian crossing at Balakleya could also be explained the same way as in Pesky and Avdiivka. Perhaps the Ukraine command considered this sector to be calm, as no fighting took place there in the past few months, and then transferred the artillery from this sector to Kherson as well. I cannot say if this is just a skirmish or part of a larger offensive, but if the Russians actually break through there, the objective of such a maneuver could be to secure the right flank of the Izium grouping and stop the continuous Ukrainian incursions that were threatening Izium. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description.